Welcome, guys, back to the I Love Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Woolwine, and today we are welcomed with pro wrestling referee, Mr. Kevin Woods. How we doing?
I'm doing good, my man. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate
Of
it.
course, like I told you off air, this is one that's been anticipated. I've had people asking for me to get Kevin Woods on here, so I'm glad that we could get the great, honorable Kevin Woods on the program.
The great audible Kevin Woods. I like that.
Uh, but before we dive into questions and talk about your wrestling career and all that stuff, would you like to shout out your social medias, maybe even upcoming events you'll be a part of?
So social medias, I'm on I guess three basic ones, but you'll find me most on Instagram is where I'm on the most at Kevin underscore Woods 31. Facebook, same thing. Twitter, same thing. Those are the three main that I'm on. Upcoming events, this Thursday, September 4th, if I can remember dates correctly, I'm doing second wrestling. And then next Friday, the 12th, is CSW. So those are the two ones I got up and coming.
Perfect, perfect. Kevin, I start the same place. Try to, at least on every podcast, and it's simple. When did you find professional wrestling?
As a fan,
Yeah,
you mean, or
yeah, as a fan.
as a fan? For me, the first time I could ever recall it being introduced to me was an old friend of mine named Tony Raff, who I went elementary school with, who grew up right down the street from me. We were about to go into sixth grade, so this is the late July of 2009, and he was telling me about his favorite guys of John Cena and Randy Orton and Triple H, and he always made sure to say he hated Edge. Edge was the one guy he hated. But I'm like, I kind of know what he was talking about. Like I had heard of Hulk Hogan and John Cena at that point, but I didn't know what it was. And he was telling you should watch this Raw, SmackDown, and all that. And I'm like, cool, dude. Like I don't know really what you're talking about, but sure. And about a week later, I was at my dad's for the weekend, and I was strumming through like Saturday morning shows on the TV, and there was a rerun of that week's TNA Impact. And so that's what I thought he was talking about to TNA before I was introduced to watching WWE and anything else. And that next week was the first week of school. And I was telling him about AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and Christopher Daniels and the Monster Abyss, like all in that time frame. And he's like, I have no clue what you're talking about. But but that was the real introduction. I got introduced to WWE a little later. And that was my first real introduction to it. So for me, TNA wrestling was the real first introduction to me in that 2009, 2010 era. You know, right out like shortly after that, they were promoting that Hulk Hogan was going to come into TNA, and then his debut on January 4th, 2010. Still to this day, that's my favorite wrestling moment that I ever watched as a kid on TV. Was they hyped him up for months, and I still go back sometimes and watch that episode as a whole and his debut as a whole, and it will still give me goosebumps to this day of just watching it and that feeling of I stayed up late as a kid, past my bedtime without my mom knowing of I was watching TV and watching that whole thing. It was still to this day until I die. That would be my favorite wrestling moment, as at least as a viewer of watching something. So,
uh,
introduction TNA wrestling. That was my first introduction to it.
and what about wrestling did you fall in love with?
I think the first moment that really made me fall in love with professional wrestling was when AJ Styles won the TNA Heavyweight Championship in September of 2009 at No Surrender. That was the
Okay.
first time I had ever saw a World Heavyweight Championship change hands in general, and just the magnitude of it, the crowd just losing their minds, the confetti coming down, Christopher Daniels coming in, and then the fans rush the ring, and everyone's in there, and it's just a big moment. Like that was really the first thing that really like made me fall in love of like it made me feel something that I never really felt before. I guess the pageantry of it and the importance of it, and people just hyping it up of like this is just an unbelievable moment that nobody thought would happen, and that that was really the first moment. And as time went on, of getting introduced to WWE, and then a little later on with NXT in the early days of NXT, and get into high school at that point, and hearing the stories of like Roderick Strong, for example, I think was really the first person that in like the 2014-15 time frame of hearing him come from, I say this in lovely words, but like with essentially nothing and trailer parks and coming from that and the real life stories you hear very periodically of these people and hearing where they come from and how they've gone to here, then you grow that more respect of, these people that we see on TV are larger than life to us, but they're real people that come from real backgrounds, whether big or small, bad or good. And here they are doing something that they love to do and be in front of the audience and get that adrenaline rush that I don't think could ever be comprehended of being in there and hearing that just endless amount of energy being pushed onto you. It's nothing, there's nothing like it. So that, like, the first moment that I could think of was AJ winning the TNA Heavyweight Championship for the first time.
Definitely. So we brought up Styles, we brought up Cena, but who were like some of your guys or favorites growing up when you were watching in the early 2010s throughout your high school experience and things like that?
First one for sure was AJ Styles. I legitimately do not think if there was no AJ Styles, I would not be a fan or doing this in general. And as
Okay.
time went on of getting introduced to what ECW was when the WWE Network first came about and purchasing that and rewatching, because I had seen YouTube clips and stuff like that at that point, but then being able to go back and watch like full length pay-per-views and stuff like that, I really grew to love Taz and Bubba Ray Dudley specifically. And as at the end of high school and into college, listening to their respective platforms for radio or podcasts and hearing them just talk about the business as a whole, the psychology of it, the breakdown of it, the old stories, backstage stories that people didn't hear from, or stuff like that. Like, I grew to really learn the business from their perspective of how booking works and the psychology of how a story lays out and the layers and layers and layers to where there's the payoff or the cliffhanger or the climax or whatever phrase you want to use for it. And from them to learning about just the overall business of it. So for sure, my three main guys are AJ, Taz, and Bubba Ray, for sure.
Nice. So, like growing up and going into high school, like what made you decide after like your high school experience or even maybe during that you wanted to take the leap from being a fan to actually pursue and start training?
Well, it was never something that I thought would I never thought it would be something that I would actually do. I was always a fan of it. I knew I would always be a fan of it for the rest of my life, but it was never something that I actually thought of. I'm going to do this. For me, the first thing was always baseball. From as far back as I could really remember, baseball was the number one thing of I want to go pro. I want to get drafted. I want to make the majors. I want to do all these great things. And it was something I did year round from when I was, God, 8 years old, and every year until I was a freshman in college. I played baseball at a community college near me, and it got to that point of I'm not really playing a lot in a community college, so I don't know how much further I can really take this. And that was a really dark time for me. Of this is something I always wanted since I was a little kid, and now the dream of that is over. And I was in a really dark place and down time. I was working at UPS and not really doing anything else. And I thought of like, the only other thing I could think of tried to make a career out of is something I've always loved as much as baseball, which was professional wrestling. And so I looked up schools and I found a few of them, and I found an ad for the upcoming Chicago Star Wrestling show in January of 2018. And Steve Boz was promoting the video. He's talking about, who they got coming in and the students and the school and all that. And the next day I was talking to one of my best friends who I was still going to school with at the community college that we went to, and I told him of, you I maybe wanted, and it was like a movie. Like we were working on homework, and he was writing, and he stopped, and he looked at me slowly. Can I swear on here by chance, or can I not?
Yeah, you're good.
I guess he slowly looks up to me and he
You're good.
goes, "That would be the coolest fucking thing ever." And so that was kind of the catalyst to go in and try it. And so I went to the show and I talked to Boz after the show. And then a couple days later, I was training at the CSW school. And again, that was January of 2018. And that was my real beginning of it. So my first year and a half, 2 years, I was to the whole thing, everything about it, travel, did a lot of futures royals for the CSW promotion, won a bunch of those, and it got to a point where it wasn't super fun for me anymore. I was had some nagging injuries. It kind of got to be a little bit of like a chore almost. I wasn't in a good mental space, and I thought, you know what, I don't think this is for me, and I'm gonna step away. And I don't know if I'll come back, but I just want to step away. This is not fun for me anymore. And I took about a 6, 7 month hiatus, and it just got to a point where I got that just bug and that itch to really come back after that time away. I miss the people that I worked with and the friends I made and the stories that we made. So I decided to message Boz and tell him I want to come back, but I just want to ref for now. It was easier for me on my body, and it was something for me to just get back into the swing of things and essentially earn my way back. And then the pandemic happened right there, like right after that. And then once that all went down, about October of 2020, it was just full time refereeing from then on. I fell in love with it, and I haven't looked back since.
So you brought up the training process. What did that look like for you? How long was you actually active in training before you like started doing the futures rumbles and things like that?
I was training for, I would say, about 3, 4 months before they put me in the Futures Battle Royals, and it was mainly just to get experience with being in the ring and being with people in front of live crowds and getting adapted to that atmosphere, because it's a whole different beast from training in front of your peers and being critiqued right then and there of that wasn't good or that was good or whatever the case may be, and then being out there of like, all right, go do it. You're in front of a crowd, can't mess up, gotta do what you gotta do to win. So it was definitely a way different beast of being in front of a live crowd, and then there was a lot of pressure and an anxiety with that of, coming from my background of like I wasn't a super like, how do I phrase this? I wasn't the jock in school. I was a tall, skinny kid of not a lot of self confidence. I had my very close group of friends of we played sports and then we went back and played video games. I didn't go out and party or do stuff like that. I wasn't a very sociable kid. I had a lot of stage fright, a huge amount of stage fright as a kid in high school or growing up. So that was a huge, like, I guess I'll say cultural change for me of being that way growing up and then being thrusted in front of hundreds of people now that are all looking at you and are yelling things at you and stuff like that as a wrestler. It was definitely difficult for me to adapt and get used to that for sure.
What do you remember about your in ring debut?
my in-ring debut. The first thing I remember is that when I look back at the footage of it, of like I couldn't care less about the fans at all. I just walked out and I didn't hear anything of it. I didn't look at them at all. Which looking back on, I'm like, God, I wish I would have like looked at that one person that was yelling a whole bunch of trash at me and tell him to go f himself, or something like that. Of just just mess with him. But I remember it was the Futures Battle Royal. It was March of 2018. So that was the first time I ever wrestled in front of a live crowd. And I remember the He wrestles under the name Daisy Kill now with the NWA, but I remember just he was one of the guys that was helping train me along with Steve Boz and a few others at that time, and I he was in that match in that battle royal, and I was looking at him across the ring and I said, fuck it. And I just went him and I started trying to just beat the shit out of him and work with him all over there. And he tossed me over the ring and we're both on the apron trying to fight. And he huffs me like this right on my ear. And I couldn't hear out of my ear for like the next half hour because it just the ear was constantly ringing. But that was my first match.
Who would you say were some of your biggest influences for the like in ring portion of your career?
There's so many people I would say in ring career of like guys that looked at TV, like I mentioned before, AJ Styles, Taz, Bubba Ray, like those real inspirations of psychology and working with the crowd and being able to adapt on the fly and move sets and stuff like that. But people that I physically worked with, Steve Boz, Doug Simmons for sure, Daisy Kill, who I mentioned before, Jack Shatter,
Okay.
I haven't mentioned yet, Jack Shadow is one of the first few people who he hasn't wrestled anymore. He hasn't wrestled in a bunch of years now, probably going on 4-ish years now. He hasn't wrestled, but he was one of the first guys that really gave me opportunities as a referee too of a promotion out in Rockford called Project Force City Wrestling. And he came up to me and was like, I was too scared to do practice matches at the school, so I'll just be the ref and be the ref. And he a couple weeks in, he's like, you look like you know how to do that pretty well. We need another ref out there. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, sure. So he was one of the guys that took me under his wing as well as a wrestler and as a referee too, of just giving me opportunities and giving me pointers and longing for me to strive for greatness and do good things in this business. And I owe him a lot. I owe Jason Kill a lot. Steve Boz, Doug Simmons, Jason Hades too, Vic Capri, I owe a lot to as well. Um, Off the top of my head, though, Missa Kate, honestly, I would owe a lot. I had a lot of practice matches with her at the CSW school, and just being able to work with all different shapes and sizes. So off the top of my head, all those names I owe a lot to.
Perfect. Um, did you prefer working singles or tag team matches?
You know what? I didn't do a lot of either. A lot of my matches were kind of battle royal stuff. I didn't do a lot of marquee per se singles or tag team matches. I did my handful, but I never really did a lot of
Okay.
those as a wrestler per se. Off the top of my head, I had a handful of singles matches with Ryan Matthews
Mhm.
on live shows, so those were always fun. I tagged with Ryan Matthews as well, but I didn't really do a lot of like marquee. Like my name was on the show run of singles match, like this person versus Kevin Woods. There wasn't really much of that. So I didn't. I guess if I had the choice, I prefer tag team matches because it was always fun to feed off other people in that sense of the two other people on the other side of you as well as your partner, and being able to just feed the crowd of if my guy's in trouble, getting them behind them and getting that hot tag and hearing that rush of the crowd. Probably, I would say tag matches probably if I had to choose one.
That's perfect because it leads me to my next question. You brought up Ryan Matthews, former guest of the podcast. What brought you guys together as a tag team, and what do you think contributed to the chemistry that you guys had in the ring together, whether it's together like side by side or opposed to each other against the ring?
I think my answer goes with both ways of fighting against each other and tagging with each other is that we're so different in a lot of ways, and we're very similar in a lot of ways of we both love this business, we both want to be good and all that, but we're so different in a way that we present ourselves and I guess boast ourselves in a way of Ryan Matthews, he's got that big head of his and loves to tell people he's beautiful and he's all this, and I'm kind of more, I guess, quieter in that sense of like I'd rather my work speak for itself in that way. And I think that's what made us such a good tag team when we did tag for that short time frame of, just that, how do I phrase this? Like just the contrast of styles and personalities and chemistry of, and that's what made us at least gel well together. At least in my opinion. I don't know what his take on it was. It was a while ago, but I felt like I had a lot of fun tagging with him and working with him when I did. So I got nothing but great things to say about Ryan.
Ryan at the last CSW show had one hell of a match against Warhorse, and Warhorse
Jesus Christ! Yes, he
beat the
did.
snot out of him. What
Yep. Yes, he
what's it
did.
like for you seeing somebody like that you pretty much grew up with in this business, and now having matches like that? And now I feel like for Ryan may have been his coming out party, like, hey, maybe you guys should take me more seriously than you do, kind of thing.
I think you hit the nail on the nail on the head. Is that the
Yeah.
phrase? Right, like right on it. Like, he's done his tag team work and faction work in CSW for a while. He's done singles matches and storylines and stuff like that. But I think that was the real match of, damn, that kid just took one hell of a beating and still got up and said, "Give me more." You know, I think Ryan has deserved a spotlight like that. I think he's deserved a lot in this business. He's worked hard for it. I know he's a good human being. I wouldn't say I know him super personally well on the outside of wrestling, but I know enough to know that he's a good human being and works hard and loves his family. And I think he deserved a moment like that. And I think he deserves a lot of good things moving forward, not just in CSW, but in the wrestling business in and of itself.
How did Jason Hades joining CSW kind of change the landscape of the promotion?
Jason Hades joining the promotion, man, I could talk about that for a long time, but it just a complete 180 of it. When I got there and a couple years after that, um, I don't want to say things without talking down on a few people because I definitely could, but um, from where it was, I feel like it was a place where it was a lot of older guys that and it was just kind of a feeder system for younger guys to get reps in and then go off to maybe other bigger
Mhm.
places. And I think Jason Hades really came about and wanted to make that place of like, no, this is the destination. I want to make this place to where young kids that have bright futures as well as people that have been there and done that can come here and showcase their craft while also give a platform for young kids to really showcase that, hey, I'm next in line, here's why. And he coming in slowly, but it was a very very slow process, but slowly but surely it's turned into what it is now, where you've had guys come in, um like Tommy Dreamer, like a Mustafa Ali, like a Luchasaurus. Even guys like Kyle Fletcher have come in. Well, Osprey has made an appearance there. Guys like that we could say have been to CSW, and you got guys that have come in from the Black and Brave promotion wrestling school rather out in Iowa, Seth Rollins school, like guys like Conan Lycan, Solomon Tupu, Amina Belmont, Maggie Lee, um, Jay Marsden, Jay Boucher, like all those types of people that have come from that side of it, of like coming from that school and now coming into the Chicago scene and kind of putting us on notice of like, all right, guys, step up, and like, all right, let's do it. And it's a way for us to keep pushing each other to do better. And now you see people like Maggie Lee that's now signed with TNA, Conan Lycan that has been on TNA TV before, Tupu and all of them that have been on AEW like enhancement matches, stuff like that. But besides, like, you see people from here and there pushing each other to be better, and I think that's what CSW is. It's wanting to be on that level of, like, say, a Deadlock or NWA or Major League Wrestling, or of that of like, we're a destination. We're not a system to where our young kids get reps and then go off in other places. We're here where people want to be here, and I feel like that's what CSW is now. And I would argue, you can call me biased, you can call me a homeboy, whatever you want to say, but I would argue that CSW has become one of the best wrestling promotions, not just in the Midwest, but in the whole country. I've had the fortune enough privilege to travel to places like Las Vegas and Florida and Texas, Pittsburgh, and places like that, and I've seen, the comparisons from there and here, even around here in the Midwest, like Wisconsin and Michigan and Indiana and Iowa, and it's like CSW's up there, man. And if people haven't taken notice to it, they will sooner or later.
Absolutely. With that said, like I've been to wrestling promotions from Illinois all the way to West Virginia and everywhere in between, and I'd put Chicago style wrestling up there against any of the top promotions in any of those states. And 9 times out of 10, I believe CSW would outdo them. So
I would
I
agree.
hold CSW to pretty high standard. um, Earlier you talked about your wrestling career, and then life wasn't going quite as well as maybe you wanted it to, so you took a hiatus. During that hiatus, like what made you decide, hey, I want to get back into this, but maybe not as a wrestler. I want to try maybe reffing or something like that. Like what happened, or what was the catalyst for that return?
I think it was a mixture of a couple things, but more or less it was trying my best to, like, for a couple months there I didn't watch anything. I didn't watch WWE, TNA, anything, AEW at that point, or at least AEW was just about to start, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so that was 2019. So they were promoting that they were going to be starting in that October of 2019. Just I did my best to just not watch it, and AEW came about, and I started watching AEW, and it was just the bug, the wrestling bug. It's one of those things of once you get in it, and then you just watch it again and you hear that roar and imagine yourself in that atmosphere. It's a drug, man. It's a bug. It's an itch, whatever catchphrase or cliche you want to use. It was just something I'm like, man, I got to get back in because I'm seeing now my friends that I've made on social media promoting all these shows and matches they're having and whatnot. And for a couple of shows, I came as a fan. I went to a few CSW shows as a fan. I didn't tell anybody. I just went with my brother or a couple of my friends and just went to just be a fan and watch it. And it just got to a point of like I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I'm like, I want to get back. And I felt like, I went away and I gotta earn my way back from the ground up. So that's why I said, hey, I'm gonna start as a ref and work my way back in. But I very quickly learned that I really love this refereeing gig, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I have a lot of love for. And over the years now of, again, like I said, traveling to places like Vegas and Texas and Florida to ref out there, and being able to get in contact with so many great refs in TNA, NWA, MLW. I've had the fortune, privilege to go down to Orlando, Florida, and train with Mike Chioda a handful of times and ask him a million and one questions and have him critique my matches on video and then do shows live in front of him and him critique me right after the show and say, that footwork or that placement or whatever, and being able to just absorb all of that. It's something that I didn't think I would ever love or do for that matter, and it's something that has really turned into a true love of mine and something that I want to do for a long time. It's something I hope one day to get signed to do for the rest of my life, and that's why I'm here. This is what I want to do. I've stated in other people that have talked to me on their podcasts or interviews or what have you, like, you can call it cliche, you can laugh at it, but like I want to be the greatest of all time. I want people to see me and know there goes Kevin Woods, there goes the best referee to ever do it.
Okay.
You know, that's what I want. And whether I get signed or not, whether I do this for the rest of my life or not, I want people to at least know that every time I go out there, I'm giving it everything I got. and I hope that people will at least have that. How do I phrase this? At least have that respect for me that this is something I love doing and I want to be the best at.
You brought up Mike Chioda, who I'm gonna assume is probably a big influence of yours. Who would
Tremendously,
you
yes.
who would you say are the biggest influences for the wrestling aspect, or excuse me, not the wrestling, but the referee aspect of your career?
Mike Chioda for sure. I would put him as the number one guy that I've studied more Mike Chioda matches that I care to admit, probably that I could even count. I have a playlist on my personal YouTube channel for like when I was a teenager that I have like a bunch of his matches, especially from like the WWE Vault YouTube
Hmm.
page now that was made like a year or so ago. There's so many just random Monday Night Raw matches of his that I go back and watch as much as I can. But referees, Charles Robinson for sure, Brian Hebner and Earl Hebner for sure. Current guys like Daniel Spencer, the head ref for TNA, Frank Gaston, um, just a whole bunch of guys like that. Like I study a lot of WWE refs like Sean Bennett, Chad Patton, um, and a lot of the NXT refs for sure, like Chip Daning, for example. Like I try to study everybody. The AEW refs, Stefan, Paul Turner. I try my best to kind of do what wrestlers do and take little things here and there from everybody. You know, I hear wrestlers all the time. I've heard the who's who and the people that are training, you know, like Steve Boz, for example, not to degrade in that way, but like people that are training brand new people of like, you got to take inspirations from that person, that person, that person, and now make it your own thing. And I try my best to do that with referees too. Mike Chioda's the first and real biggest inspiration for me, but I try my best to see things from other wrestlers. Like, I'm not a big fan of that. I like that. That wasn't really cool. That was cool. How can I make it my own? You know, I try my best to do that with that. I try to study everybody.
Do you think being a wrestler before a referee helps you in like doing your job as a referee?
Oh, 1,000,000% for sure. The movement and the pacing, the psychology of it, and being able to just kind of not assume, but be wary to, okay, this way, doing this type of style, I should be here. They're going at this pace. I should be ready to move here and there. Or going into it, these guys are probably going to be trying to do a lot of high flying things. I need to be cognizant of where they're moving and also be more wary of making sure they don't land on their necks. You know,
Yeah.
I think definitely being a wrestler first and then going into the refereeing is definitely helpful for me because a lot of times I hear a lot of stories like it was always the opposite. People got into refereeing first to then move into refereeing or to wrestling per se. And for me, it was the opposite, which I always kind of snicker at and laugh at because it's always the opposite way around.
Um, something that interests me about your career is you've done your work on the independents, but you've also been able to work with companies like the NWA or MLW. Um, what are like some of the biggest differences between maybe working a CSW show or an AAW show versus the likes of NWA or MLW?
The the first thing that really comes to mind is the you're working for the TV cameras compared to independent show where you're really working for the fans. Not that you're not working for the fans in shows like MLW and NWA, but for them it's a television show. They're
Yes.
filming for television, so you have to adapt to that style of it's a lot more fast paced and oftentimes a lot more shorter. So and you have to be really able to adapt on the fly and being able to like for me in Major League Wrestling first match I ever did, I didn't really at least know what to expect. But I got out there and I'm hearing the guy in the gorilla on like watching the monitors call everything and tell me everything. And now I'm hearing three different conversations. I'm hearing him talk to me. I'm hearing him talk to the guys right in front of him. I'm hearing him talk to the guys in the truck about lighting and the camera angles and stuff like that. So I'm hearing three different conversations as the match is going on right in front of me, being able to do my job then. So it's definitely a huge.
Kevin, what would you say is the wildest match or moment that you've been able to be a part of as a referee?
Oh God. um, that's a very good question. I'm not sure off the top of my head. The thing is, like, I think of moments that I wasn't directly a part of as a ref, but I was able to experience right then and there. Like
Okay.
the first thing that comes to my mind is when uh, Kyle Fletcher came in to CSW and then said that, hey, he's got his own referee, and Will Ospreay came out for CSW. That was one of the coolest moments of my career right then and there. Just being able to talk to Will and shoot the shit with him a little bit. The referee shirt that he had was my spare one. I'll take claim for that. um, Stuff like that. Jew coming in again that I wasn't the ref for, but came into CSW and being able to talk with him after the show and stuff like that. Craziest thing that I personally did. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I could think of one thing of I legitimately thought someone got seriously hurt. I was working a match with All Heroes Wrestling up north near the Wisconsin border, and there was a match with Metalhead and Lizard Man, and they did a spot in the match where Lizard Man ran towards Metalhead as he was on the ropes and pushed him over his head, back body dropped him. He went over the ropes and just went straight to the concrete floor. It fell about 7 feet or so, just straight onto the straight onto the concrete floor. And I went up to Lizard's dad, and I'm in his face. I'm like, dude, are you okay? Like, please tell me you're okay. And I swear to God, he looks at me and he goes, I'm good. Did it look good? Like, I love working with Lizard Man, but dude, that dude scares me. I'm always worried that he's gonna fall on his neck, break his neck. But that's what he does. And every time I check on him, he's like, I'm good. Did it look great? Did it look good? Thanks, dude. Thanks for giving me a panic
That's amazing. Um, what you know, I was going through like your social medias and stuff, and on there it says you've done extra work for the likes of TNA. What's your experience like working and doing that kind of work with them?
That experience, I've been able to do that a handful of times. And like I mentioned before, when we first started this discussion, of like I was a TNA kid before I was ever a WWE or anything other guy for professional wrestling as a whole. So being able to do that here at Cicero Stadium, go out to Detroit, Vegas, Tennessee, being able to do extra work for them and try to pick the brains of their refs, like I said, Daniel Spencer or Frank Snorn or Paige, um, just being able to watch them and pick their brains and talk to them, and then come in there on the little day that they build everything and see how they build a whole television production from the ground up, from literally nothing in an arena to what it looks like on all their shows and television shows, and being able to talk with a couple of the wrestlers there and just again pick their brains and try my best to not overstep my boundaries there as an extra talent, and some of that helps build the ring and all that, but still try my best to just learn and be a sponge and ask questions and watch how their professionalism and how they go about themselves of like this needs to be perfect. Even this one little screw, if it needs to be tightened right here, if that makes it better, we got to do it. I try my best to take that mindset into shows like CSW or other shows that I'm a part of, and do my best to how can I do what I can do, what can I control that's in that. How do I'm gonna have myself There's the way I heard John Cena say this in a couple of his interviews of control the controllable. So if there's something I can't control, I try my best not to worry about it. But the stuff that I can control, what can I make better? Lighting, the background, the ring, talking about matches, production, the way like anything and anything I can do to help. I try my best to learn as much and have as much hats on my head so that I'm able to make the show better in any sort of way. So I try. What was it like doing extra work for TNA? It was amazing for me personally as a fan, but also as a professional and as a performer to see that next level and how can I incorporate it to what I do.
Was you on any spots in particular that made it on air?
I I did a few run-ins as the Mustafa, the Secret Serviceman. So there was a few
Okay.
times I was able to walk out with him and be in front of those crowds as the person with the suit and the sunglasses and the earpiece. Being able to do pull ups with him, with Speedball Mike Bailey, and again, try my best to learn from him and Speedball as well, and just try my best to pick their brains and do stuff like that. That's one thing. You know, I was a couple of times just an extra person in the crowd, or you could see me being security, doing stuff like that. So it, haven't been able to perform that. That's the next real bucket list of mine. Of if I could ref just one time for TNA wrestling of the place where it literally all started for me as a fan, I could die happy. You know, I could retire happy. I was able to ref for the place that literally started this love for me, and everything else after that is gravy.
Definitely. I think it's definitely possible. Um, what's it like for you being, in the referee position, and then some nights at these shows getting, I don't say this lightly, but getting the biggest reaction of the night sometimes throughout the whole show?
Um, I I do my best to not make it about myself. I never want it to be about me. I never want to have the crowd look at me instead of the wrestlers in their performance because it's not about me. If a referee ever tells you that or comes off as they want the spotlight, they want to make it about themselves, they're in the wrong business. Then they should be a wrestler. It's not about the refs. It's about what can I do to enhance the match? What can I do to get that big reaction? What can I do to make sure that the wrestlers are safe and doing what they need to do and are not hurt? And add to it as any way that I can without making it about myself. The last thing I want to do is take away the attention. But being in moments where you could feel the ground literally shake, there's nothing like it. I've never done drugs. I've never drank anything. I've never done anything of that. I'm about as straight edge as you could possibly find. But I would imagine that's about as close as I would ever get to being high on something. That adrenaline high, that adrenaline rush of just an enormous amount of just energy just being thrust upon him. I've been able to feel the little energy of that noise from a crowd being pushed against me, and it's one of the coolest things in the world that I could ever experience. The biggest moment I would say that I wasn't in it to perform, but I was at the Allstate Arena when CM Punk returned to WWE Survivor Series in 2023. I was in
Okay.
the crowd for that, and that was by far the coolest moment of my whole wrestling life. Of hometown guy, that whole story of he would never return, had the bad falling out, the whole thing. Went to AEW, left there on bad terms, and being able to be there for that moment of the crowd was going so nuts that you could not hear the music play. You heard that little like TV static, and then the crowd went nuts, and I didn't hear the music for the rest of the time he was out there. You couldn't hear it, and that is definitely something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. That was one of the coolest moments of my entire life, not just wrestling life, but my whole life as a whole.
Kevin, what would you say are some of your goals moving into 2026?
2026. I would love to go into Canada. I this year I was able to get my passport, so I'm really hoping to do Canada work. Um, Maybe Mexico work. I'm maybe not that far. Maybe not so much that, but I would love to go into Canada. I know some refs in Canada, um, and I would love to go out into Canada for 2026 if I could. Um, More of the same. Each year I try to go into that year of 2024 was really my best year at that point of my career, and I went into this year of how can I top that, and I feel like I've done that in a lot of different ways. And it's just each year of doing what I can to better myself, watch my matches, study my own matches, study other matches, and be better. Every single match I can is like, how can I be better the next time? Get that good material, send it off to other places to maybe get opportunities like TNA, like maybe WWE. I send my stuff into their recruit website. I have contacts with a couple of their referees, and I'm sending my stuff to them as much as I can. And it's what can I expect for 2026, or what do I want to do in 2026? More, more of what I'm doing. I want to take that next step. I want to do what I can to, like I said before, I want to be the greatest of all time, and I try my best to not have that mindset like it's linear. There's anybody that tells you this business it's linear. It's not linear. You'll have ups and downs and everything like that in this business. Like case in point, as a wrestler, went on a hiatus and then came back. Everybody has those ups and downs, injuries, whatever you have be, but what I want to do for 2026 is I want to go to Canada. I want to ref for TNA. I want to get looked at by WWE. I'd love to get signed by WWE. That's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate goal for me. So ultimate goal is that 2026. I'd love to work in Canada.
Okay. Kevin, I want to say thank you first and foremost for coming on here. It was an absolute blast. I'm looking forward to seeing you in and around the Chicagoland area. And if you ever want to come on for part two, I'd love to have you as a guest again.
You say when? I'm in.
So,
Let's do it. I'm always down. I love doing stuff. Yes, please. Anytime you want me on, just let me know.
sounds good, man. With that said, I will just leave this at see you next time then.
All right, brother. Sounds good.